This slideshow will introduce you to basic approaches in photography. The first two sections, looking and lighting, are primarily for making photographic imagery. The third section, photographic media, looks at various examples of how artists have worked photographically. Here, looking involves considering the full frame of the viewfinder or image and the degree of clarity within an image. In photography's early history, practitioners were often so excited to capture an image that they didn't pay complete attention to what was in the frame. In his book, The Pencil of Nature, one of the inventors of photography, William Henry Fox Talbot, describes looking at his photographs and being amazed by details and objects that he hadn't noticed when making the exposure. In those images, details competed with one another rather than supporting a directed focus. Over time, as he continued to make images, Talbot begins to pay more attention to the scene before making the exposure. Images such as the open door shown here reveal how he used strong contrast between lit and shadowed areas and strong lines, such as the diagonal line of the broom, to direct the image's focus. In composing these images, Talbot was influenced by compositional conventions he'd noted in paintings. Gestalt theory, the study of how people perceive elements within a frame, suggests that viewers take in all elements of a scene at once. Tom Grill describes this image as having a weak frame, in that it is composed of two disjointed elements. His observation of the weak frame is based on Gestalt theory's principle of proximity, in which elements that are further apart are less likely to be seen as a group. Understanding Gestalt theory can help you to make informed choices when framing your subject, but remember that a weak frame may make for a successful or problematic image depending upon your goals. For example, Gary Winogrand aspired to make images that seemed disjointed. Rather than showing the politician here as a commanding presence, Winogrand tilted the horizontal base of the frame so that the speaker seems unstable and the surrounding people are preoccupied individuals rather than a united crowd. Artist John Baldessari intentionally disobeys rules of photographic composition. Here, he's bravely defied the rule that says you should never photograph someone when standing in front of a tree, or it will look as though the pole is coming out of their head. Many of the ways we inherently compose images comes from cues we've learned from our environment. For example, here I framed the two boys on either side of the image to direct you to the center of the scene. This compositional device comes from early landscape photography. Here, Carlton Watkins has created order in this landscape by enframing the scene with trees on either side. The trees direct us on to the mountains. Watkins' vision was influenced by landscape painting, such as Thomas Cole's The Hunter's Return, shown here. And Cole was influenced by landscape architecture, where gardeners used trees and shrubs to enframe views of the land. These landscaping principles exist today, and because we're used to encountering a home that's framed by bushes or entering a park framed by trees, we tend to intentionally and unconsciously continue these ways of looking at the world when composing our own images. Another photographic device that originated in landscape design is the idea of the middle distance garden, which is a small garden that serves as a kind of visual pause in the midst of a larger space. Photographers can use the middle distance strategy to give an intermediate focus to the image. Here, Reneke Dijkstra has placed the camera slightly lower than eye level. It's a vantage point that puts the emphasis on the subject. We think about the new mother or her baby and forget about the photographer taking the picture. Even though this seems like an image taken objectively or without viewpoint, the straight-on vantage is as opinionated as any other. Photographing in the early 20th century, Alexander Rodchenko urged image makers to take photographs from more radical angles to disrupt viewers from complacently looking at images. These worm's eye and bird's eye viewpoints were meant to inspire political change. If citizens began to see the world anew, they might also begin to question social and political agencies. Over time, however, photographers who did not have ambitions for political change adopted these radical vantage points. Here, a close-up worm's eye perspective is used to sell glasses. Though the image is not meant to provoke change, the photographer is still relying on the vantage point to suggest that the product is modern and stylistically progressive. Depth of field is the amount of focus in the image from foreground to background. The image on the left has wide depth of field. Most of the image is in focus. The image on the right has shallow depth of field. The middle tower is in focus, but everything before and after is blurry. Depth of field is controlled by many factors, including the lens's aperture. The smaller the aperture, the greater the depth of field. Depth of field can be used to direct our attention in a scene. In the image on the left, the entire image is in focus, so we pay equal attention to the body, the stairs, and the door. In the image on the right, depth of field is more shallow, with the body being the most focused part of the scene. Therefore, we pay more attention to the body, and the stairs and the door become secondary characters. Point-and-shoot digital cameras tend to produce images with wide depth of field. Everything will be focused. You can alter the image's clarity in Photoshop using the gradient tool and a blur filter. Instructions for this process are in our Reframing Photography book. This is another example of how to use focus and blur to direct our attention to particular parts of the scene. And here, an example of how complete clarity may be used when all parts of the image are equally important. Several photographers have questioned the need for any focus at all. For his No Focus series, Ralph Eugene Meatyard would throw the lens out of focus before he took the picture. He only printed images that had no recognizable subject. For this series, Uta Barth focused on a person and then asked them to leave the scene. The resulting image shows the out-of-focus background that would have been ignored had there been a distinct subject. For Barth, photography allows us to do what our eyes are incapable of, to see without focus. In this next part of the presentation, we'll look at light and shadow as tools that you can use to emphasize or hide parts of the scene and to convey particular psychological or cultural qualities. For example, to designate objects or scenes as mystical, forbidding, or calming. The casting of shadows is a way of producing an image from a subject. In that sense, cast shadows are unfixed photographs. Here, Christian Boltanski uses shadows to write with light, to create ephemeral portraits. Working in the late 19th century, Henry Peach Robinson also associated shadows with death and loss. The image reveals a Victorian fascination with death and a young child's premature loss of life. Robinson clothed the girl in white to suggest she is an innocent figure, while death, clothed in black, hovers at the window and forecasts what is to come. Our contemporary sense of the drama of light and shadow comes from old German fairy tales, where wickedness lurked in the dark forest and blackness personified evil. The symbolism of light and dark was made visible in woodcuts by German expressionist artists such as Käthe Kollwitz, who used high contrast between black and white to dramatize their images. German expressionist film directors translated the chiaroscuro of the woodcuts to film. For Dr. Caligari, heavy shadows were painted onto the sets. American film noir continued the use of heavy shadowing to create chaotic worlds that reflected the sense of hopelessness after World War II and during the early Cold War. Characters often seem to be overwhelmed by pools of shadow and unruly environments that are cut in ribbons of light. German artist Hans Bellmore photographed his doll, a life-size puppet with interchangeable parts, in haunting situations with German expressionist lighting. Here, there's only enough light to reveal the figure and the half-consumed meal. While Hans Bellmore created his images to describe personal traumas, documentarian Esther Bubley photographed on assignment for the United States Farm Security Administration in the 1930s. Yet here she uses a similar light and composition as Hans Bellmore when she documented the loneliness of life in this boarding house. In the 1980s, André Serrano submerged this crucifix in urine and flooded the scene with light to suggest the divine combination of the body of Christ with the bodily fluid of a human. Though this image, Piss Christ, is often interpreted as critical of Christianity, Serrano intended to use light and urine to suggest that divine light is part of physical reality. The control of light was very important to a group of photographers known as Group F64, which included Ansel Adams and Edward Weston. They used the zone system to ensure that every photographic image had 10 zones of value, from pure white to pure black. This understanding of tonal range was very different than photographer Roy de Caravas, who used a subtler, darker range of tones when photographing everyday activities of African Americans in Harlem in the 1950s. You can see his work at this link. Reneke Dijkstra also uses more diffuse lighting to photograph subjects. The drama comes from subtleties of body language rather than from the lighting. Adrienne Salinger set up studio lights when making her series of portraits of teenagers in their bedrooms. Rather than wanting the light to seem natural or discreet, she wanted there to be evidence of her presence. Shadows from her lights reveal that she was there in the room, potentially influencing each teen. O. Winston Link used nighttime as a dark backdrop to photograph steam engines. He chose to photograph steam engines at night so that their steam would show up white rather than sooty gray. Link's images seem like documentary photographs, but they're carefully directed. To make this image, Link lined the track with lights. You can see some of them. They look like little black dots. The convertible is Link's, but he directed the couple to cuddle inside. The image on the movie screen was from the movie playing, but it didn't show up when the train went by. Link cut and pasted it later. Link took his photographs at a time when steam engines were about to be phased out and replaced by diesels. His images show a nostalgia for the steam engine and for small-town American life. He emphasizes the plane and train to note how transportation is about to change. Quality of light refers to the hardness or softness of light. Sources of hard light include sunlight on a cloudless day. Hard light produces strong contrast between shadowed and lit areas. Another source of hard light, a photoflood, and another, a flash. You can soften the hard light of flash by covering the flash with a semi-transparent material. Here, the flash was used to take the picture on the left. For the photo on the right, the flash was wrapped in white tights, which diffused or softened the light to reduce the glare and strong reflections. Sources of soft or diffuse light include sunlight that's passing through clouds, a softbox, and a homemade diffuser. This one is made by wrapping a foam core frame with semi-transparent material. We have instructions for making this diffuser and some of the tools to come in our book and in our web video tutorials. You can add light into a scene by redirecting fall-off light, extra light that's moving past the subject. This is a homemade aluminum foil reflector made by crinkling foil and then gluing it to a scored and bent piece of foam board. Instructions for making this reflector are in the book and on the website. Here, the foil reflector is being used to bounce back light onto the shadowed side of the figure. Although light looks white to our eyes, our brain has corrected the light so that the color cast isn't apparent. Light is actually capable of being a great range of temperatures, and these are measured using the Kelvin scale. You can see here the range from reddish yellow of candlelight at 1900 Kelvin to the blue light of daylight, which ranges from 5500 to 11,000 Kelvin, depending on time of day, time of year, and atmospheric conditions. Because no film or digital sensor can respond to all of these color temperatures, the photography industry has established 2 points along the scale: 3200 Kelvin for yellowish tungsten light. This is the kind of light from household light bulbs. And 5500 Kelvin for daylight. When photographing, make sure you're aware of the color temperature of light. Although we say daylight is 5500 Kelvin, it can vary depending on time of day and year. In the top left, the house is photographed in the bluish light of an overcast morning. In the top right, the house is in the warmer light of early afternoon direct sun. Bottom left shows light at dusk, and bottom right shows artificial light from a car's lamps. Flashlight is the same color temperature as daylight. Studio flash is also daylight balanced. A slide projector uses a tungsten bulb. If you need a strong beam of light, a projector is a great source. Just insert a blank slide frame and it will cast a rectangular beam. Flashlights and other handheld lights can be good sources of light. They're usually tungsten. This is a photo flood with a tungsten bulb. You can see that the bulb is yellowish white. And here, a photo flood with blue daylight bulb. I bought this housing for the light bulb at a farm store. They sell these as chicken hatching lights, and they're inexpensive and easy to clip in place and to direct. You can find inexpensive lighting equipment on eBay. It's useful to have 2 lights with stands or tripods. Make sure to set your camera to the correct light temperature or you may get a color cast in the image. This set of images shows the variation in color cast depending on how you do or don't correct color temperature. All the images were photographed in tungsten light. The 3 images on the top were taken with film. On the top left, this extremely yellow image shows what happens when you photograph with daylight film in tungsten light. It's almost impossible to remove such an extreme color cast when printing in the darkroom. On the top middle, the photographer has corrected the cast during the exposure by placing an 80A blue filter on the lens. In the top right, the photographer has used the correct film, tungsten film, in the tungsten light. The bottom 3 images were taken with a digital camera. To make the exposure on the bottom left, the photographer set the camera to automatic white balance. In the bottom middle, he corrected that automatic white balance image using Photoshop's photo filters. And in the bottom right image, he set the camera's color temperature to tungsten. In instances where the color cast does not muddy the entire image, the choice of color is at the artist's discretion. You may want an image of space travel to have the cold blue futuristic color of the bottom middle image, or to have the slightly yellow 1960s color of the bottom right. When photographing, you can use color as a character in the scene, or color objects and surfaces to suggest particular moods and to differentiate between parts of a scene. In this image, the overall bluish light subdues the scene. The white spotlit ballerina costume stands out as though appearing on stage, and the red glow coming from under the door suggests that something odd is happening backstage. That scene was colored mainly with homemade colored gels, such as this one, in which several layers of colored cellophane or clear gift wrap is wrapped around a wire frame. This is a yellow-colored gel. When using gels made from cellophane, don't expose them to lights for too long, and don't put the gel too close to the light or it may burn. You can find instructions for making these gels in our book and on our website tutorials. On top is the artist's plan for lighting the scene. The main light is an unfiltered tungsten light. She used an unfiltered flashlight to create the strong beam on the ballerina costume, a blue filtered light on the back wall, and a purple filtered light in the closet. Another property of light to consider is the direction of light, which will affect what is visible, the direction of shadows, and how textured surfaces appear. In this series, which appears in our book, the artist experimented with backlighting, front lighting, side lighting positioned at various angles, top lighting, and lighting from underneath. The focus of each image shifts radically depending on whether the face is illuminated, what parts of the mask are illuminated, and how flat or three-dimensional the surfaces appear. In this 3rd section, we'll look at a range of photographic processes. In the first work, Garth Amundsen creates his own lenses by sewing plastic soda bottles into elaborate, exaggerated shapes. This is a portrait of the artist captured through one of his lenses. Franz Jahn copied an entire gallery using a handheld photocopier that spit out a paper recording of everything it scanned. He placed these strips of photographs over the original surfaces to create the copied gallery. Here, Franz sat on the roof of the museum and scanned the sky for 24 hours with a flatbed scanner. Tim Hawkinson used photography to see what he is incapable of seeing, all the parts of his body that aren't visible to his eyes. He put the images together to form this skin. The black disc to the side of the bicycle is a reverse camera obscura. Inside is a miniature landscape. Pedaling the bike creates power that turns on lights inside the camera obscura. The lights project the interior landscape through holes in the camera. The cyclist creates her own environment as she rides. Adam Foos creates images using light and chemistry. For the series titled Love, Foos placed disemboweled rabbits on a large sheet of photographic paper, then exposed the still life to light. The colors of the image come from light passing through areas of lesser translucency and from the rabbit's intestinal acids. For his movie images, Hiroshi Sugimoto documented palatial theaters built in the golden age of cinema using only the light from the movie. The camera shutter stayed open during the entire duration of the film, so that what you see is the theater's architecture, and on the screen the entire length of the movie. Traditional still life, landscape, and nude painting often showed idealized scenes, such as bouquets of flowers that would never have bloomed at one time, and landscapes that appear natural but were highly constructed. Kate Buxey combines these traditions in one self-portrait. In the image, she's clothed with a feast of traditional British foods. Pierre Gore uses a historic process, gum bichromate, to print photographic images of masculinity and wholesome icons of consumption onto canvas. He softens or clarifies images by painting and distressing the canvas. Screen printing is a great way to print photographic imagery on fabric. This pillowcase provides all the information you need if you're abducted by aliens in the night. Images can be reproduced through a variety of materials. Here, the yarns of Latchhook Rug become the pixels of Whitney Lee's image, Soft Porn. Collage can be used to join images together. Anne Rockland cut and reassembled found postcards to create an exaggerated Main Street. Here, I've wrapped photographic prints around a three-dimensional, bendable form to create a figure that acts out my physical memories. A book can be a great way to present photographs. This is the layout available at blurb.com, which offers high-quality, inexpensive printing. Keetra Dixon constructed her own photo booth where she may secretly analyze sitters. The strips of photographs appear with mysterious graphic marks, symbols, and messages. You can find commercial photo booths in theaters, arcades, museums, and other spots, and use them to create multiple images. This is a series of stamps produced for Nick Tobier's Revolution. Check out the Reframing Photography book for more photographic projects, ideas, and processes.